Hello guys, I am George from NightFlickX, and this is my first video on this channel. In this video, we will be covering 3 R/no sleep stories. So without any hesitation, let's start the video. If you ever receive a note on a flight with rules you must follow, no matter how absurd they seem, because if you don't, you may never make it off the plane. Can I check your ticket, please? I handed the ticket that I'd been twirling around in my hands for the past hour to the flight attendant. She nodded at it approvingly before producing a sheet of paper from the file that she was holding and placing it inside my folded ticket. "Have a nice flight," she commented enthusiastically before handing my ticket back to me. I grabbed my ticket and stared at the folded sheet of paper. Inside my ticket, curiously, before finding my seat. Once I settled down in my seat, I removed the folded sheet of paper from my ticket and placed the ticket in my bag. Upon unfolding the sheet of paper, I realized it was a handwritten note. The handwriting seemed rushed. I have transcribed the note from memory here. Rules for surviving this flight though: not speak of this sheet to any passenger. You are the only human on this flight. Check the time on your phone after reading this sheet. All rules will apply based on the time of your phone. During the first hour of the flight, do not talk to anyone. People may try to talk to you, but ignore them, completely littering the second hour of the flight. You may start talking again, but if anyone mentions the window, okay? Do not look outside the window in any circumstances. If you hear a child crying in the cabin, immediately run to the bathroom. If the screen of your entertainment console suddenly goes black, immediately look away and do not stare at it. During the third hour of the flight, the captain will make an announcement. Follow the instructions during the fourth hour of the flight. Do not sit in your seat if you make it past the fourth hour. You will need to spend the rest of the flight evading the chaser. You will know who the chaser is when you see them. The captain will make an announcement of the plane landing. As soon as you hear this announcement, Q should way to the exit door and open E2 will find that the outside is simply a black void. Jump into it without hesitation. Reread the rules again while chuckling. Did they give one of these to every passenger, or was I somehow randomly chosen for this prank? I checked the time on my phone just to humor the list. 7:13 a.m. So this would be the first hour of the flight. Suddenly, a young man walked over to my seat and sat right beside me. I gave him a casual side glance and saw that he was carrying what looked to be a laptop bag. Great, I thought. He'll work on whatever he's doing and leave me alone. For the flight, the man didn't even bother to exchange a single word with me as he settled down in his seat and put on his seatbelt. He stared straight ahead and completely avoided me. I let him be and started to fiddle with my flight console. Some people just like to be left alone, I guess. Soon enough, the captain made an announcement of the plane starting, and the steady hum of the plane engines started to vibrate the entire cabin. The plane started to accelerate until the G-force pushed me into my seat. Moments later, I felt the plane rising into the air. I am typically not scared of flights, but getting on a flight always makes me a bit nervous. This time though, my stomach was in knots and beads of sweat were running down my forehead. My instincts told me I was stepping into danger, grave danger. I dismissed my thoughts in that awful gut feeling, chalking it down to feeling a little creeped out by the note. The young man on my left suddenly tapped on my shoulder. I jolted up like I had just been electrocuted. Even through my jacket, his hand felt cold. Cold and heavy, like a dead person's hand. I turned around and faced the young man. His face seemed wrong. You know how those realistic human robots can creep people out because of how close to human they are. Yet subconsciously, we can tell that they aren't human. This man was giving me that same unsettling feeling, and his facial features were just artificial in a way I couldn't place. Maybe it was his eyes, a little too big, the pupils abnormally dilated. Or maybe it was his nose, not exactly in the center of his face. Or perhaps it was his mouth, lips way too thin and long. Don't get me wrong, he didn't look obnoxiously fake. In fact, it was those very subtle blemishes in his facial features that made him look like something trying to look like a human dot. And then he spoke. His voice was normal. Upon hearing his voice, the man seemed to look normal too, and I thought I was just freaking out for no reason. "Hey, do you wear headphones?" he asked Ed. That was a weird question to ask. Did he want headphones? I was about to open my mouth to speak when he spoke again. "How would you feel if I cut your hand off right now?" What was disturbing wasn't the nature of the question itself, but the fact that he spoke in such a calm manner. It was as if he was asking me how my day was. Suddenly, my mind went to the list of rules that I had subconsciously been squeezing in my hand. The first rule said to not talk to anyone on the flight, no matter how much they try to talk to you. I decided to ignore the man. He seemed really weird anyways, and if I was being honest, the list of rules wasn't the reason I chose to ignore him. He stopped pestering me and turned to work on his laptop. I looked over at his laptop slowly and gasped at what I saw on his screen. He had a photo of me on his screen. That's it. It's nothing else. Just a full screen photo of me. Before I could process that properly, I looked over at his keyboard and noticed that it wasn't a standard keyboard. In fact, it really wouldn't even count as a keyboard. It was made up of oddly shaped keys, all marked with strange letters that I doubt existed. The man continued to stare intently at the photo of me on his screen. It was then that I realized that the list of rules wasn't a joke. Suddenly, a flight attendant popped out of nowhere and asked me, double quotes, "Sir, is this man bothering you?" "Yes, he is," I replied before my voice caught up in my throat. In under a second, everyone in the cabin snapped their heads around until they were staring directly at me. Their faces, they all looked wrong, inhuman. Slowly, their long, thin lips curled into wide smiles, and red tears started to roll down their faces and started to run towards me. Now, let's start the second story, asterisk. I'm a flight attendant on the shuttle to hell. I don't think I can work here anymore. Have you ever thought about something so far out of left field that nobody could possibly know you were thinking about it, only for the same topic to show up as a targeted ad or as part of casual conversation moments later? It had always happened to me more often than felt normal, but only one of those daydreamy bouts of contemplation led me to my current job. Midday was approaching at a glacial pace when the idea of becoming a flight attendant wormed its way into my bored, desk-bound mind. Sure, I'd mostly be dealing with the same type of annoying person 30,000 feet higher than usual, but I would quite literally have the world at my feet. A few years of toughing working weekends and holidays out to a more senior position and I'd be grand. My boss walking by and leaning in over my shoulder snapped me out of my daze, and the fleeting thought remained as any other during a given day. Fleeting, the day continued as any other, and I made my way home for another night of laying in bed and watching old sitcom reruns, as had become tradition. A few hours later, I headed to bed, only to find a small manila envelope lying on my nightstand. It wasn't there when I'd gotten home. That much I was certain of. And so I cautiously approached and slipped out the contained letter. Flight attendant role available out of redacted International Airport. Initial trial shift this Saturday. Boarding pass attached. All necessities provided. Bring passport only. I took a risk for the first time in my sheltered, seemingly predetermined life and showed up at the airport that weekend. The outright strangeness of the entire proposal wasn't lost on me, but I didn't care. A part of me might have even been spurred on by it. The process that Saturday went as usual, except I, of course, didn't have anything with me and I didn't know where I was going. Like one of those mystery flights, except it was dumbfoundingly also a job interview of some kind. A chink agent directed me to gate 6, and I made my way there with a nervously excited haste. The typical stuff followed, except I and a few other people were given uniforms and a 5-minute briefing before boarding. I suppose they wanted to see how quick on our feet we were as part of that first shift, as well as making it clear that we would be very well compensated. We had one rule drilled into our heads. Stay at the front of the aircraft for the first 30 minutes of flight time and keep your heads fixed towards the cockpit. Little weird, but no biggie, I silently thought. It was supposed to be a flight attendant role, but all they really asked us to do beyond those first 30 minutes was stand around and make sure everybody got off the plane at our destination, except us. They made it very clear that we were never to deplane unless at our home airport. There went the dream of a sunrise over a pretty shoreline and dinner in a fancy downtown restaurant hundreds of miles away. I resigned myself to thinking about how good the money was. I will never forget getting onto that first flight and realizing it was empty, that none of the people standing with us at the gate had gotten on before departure, that the people who gradually appeared as if they'd always been there in ever-growing numbers must have boarded from somewhere, else. The knowing looks on the faces of all those seated people. Some of them pled, some screamed, and others just gazed off beyond the headrest in front of them and into parts unknown. Funnily enough, that first flight was the only time we didn't have to drag someone off the plane, kicking and screaming. I suppose they threw us a deliberate softball and knew we would learn to put up with the tougher passengers further down the line. The return flight was uneventful, and I spent the night recalling some of the names I'd seen on the manifest, both out of genuine curiosity, as well as a need to confirm the reality I'd stepped into. A reality that I learned nobody was to ever explicitly confirm. Endless Google searches later, I'd arrived at the answer I'd already known. The passengers on board were dead. The expressions worn on their faces told the rest of the story. Given we weren't permitted to bring anything except our passports with us, I had only managed to memorize 10 of the 30 or so names on the manifest, but the sample size was large enough to testify as to the very real nature of what I'd been thrown into, as if scheduled to coincide with my desire to back out. The payment for my first flight arrived in my bank account with a satisfying ding notification. I couldn't possibly walk away from this much money, I thought to myself. Besides, all I'm doing is standing guard for people who would be going there anyway. Asterisk. Naive at best, downright immoral at worst. There was no real way I knew everybody on board deserved to be going to hell. I wasn't omniscient, nor did I have the ability to determine the criteria for something so, final. And yet, I pressed forward, past a certain point. I lost track of how many shuttles I'd stood watch over. The guilt still gnawed at me, and I had a great many sleepless nights. Sometimes I'd see the faces of those on board silently judging me from beyond. Just one more flight, I told myself. Just one more, then I can pay off my car. Just one more, and I can move into a nicer place. Just one more. My final flight was yesterday. I don't think I can ever be on that shuttle again. At least, not out of choice. Nothing out of the ordinary happened between waking up in the morning and the passengers blinking into this liminal existence once we were high above the clouds. But then I heard him. An elderly man in row 6 with a frail voice was calling my name. It's not endlessly pressing the call button, not shouting for a flight attendant, not even a general call for help. This was something new entirely. He was calling for me. My heart sank below what I thought to be possible, and my body subsequently froze. Something screamed at my every instinct to stay exactly where I was, to pretend I hadn't heard that voice, beckoning me, daring me to find out why. I still don't know how long I remained in this state before I felt the cold touch of a bony hand on my shoulder and a whisper in my ill-prepared ear. You aren't supposed to be here yet, asterisk. Thank you guys for viewing this video. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe my channel. Bye.